We have our one last speaker before we turn it over to the discussion portion of the day. Our last speaker today is our own Dr. Andrew Van Kessel. He's Director of Research here at VIDO. Andrew grew up on a farm in Nova Scotia, a dairy farm in Nova Scotia, and has always retained a strong interest in the livestock industry. He's held several leadership roles, including the Acting Associate Dean of Research for the College of Agriculture and Bioresources, as well as the head of the Department of Animal Poultry Science here at the U of S. He's a former board member of the Prairie Swine Centre and a member of the Board and Science Advisor for Swine Innovation. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everyone, for spending the afternoon with us. I know it was getting a little toasty about an hour ago. I was chatting with Egan there. The coats had to come off a little bit, so hopefully we got the temperature a little better regulated now. We thought, with respect to VIDO, of course, as we increase our discussion around FMD, lots of conversations about what role VIDO can play in terms of Canada's response to FMD. Obviously, the easy answer to that question is we can have a summit and we can help to educate the livestock industry and stakeholders in terms of this obviously potentially devastating disease. For the rest, we are, in terms of direct roles, we're obviously having those conversations now, and part of the opportunity here, having the experts here, is to continue to have those conversations about a role that VIDO could play. But I guess to address that, it would be useful to share with the community VIDO's vision, the capacity and expertise that we currently have, and the work that we're doing in terms of supporting animal disease control. I have our vision up in the upper right-hand corner, healthy people, healthy animals. It's really about, our vision is really about underlining VIDO's role both in the human health and animal health sector, and embracing that One Health strategy. And I'll come back and explain One Health a bit more later on. But very much VIDO's role encompasses both of those things. So what are we? We are an institute. We are part of the University of Saskatchewan, so we're a research institute directly connected with the University of Saskatchewan. Chris Bigland started VIDO nearly 50 years ago now, a veterinary professor at the Western College of Veterinary Medicine. And again, nearly 50 years later, here we are with significant infrastructure and the ability to contribute substantively to infectious disease control. Our major infrastructure in terms of helping us with that mission is a large containment capacity, Canada's largest high containment infrastructure. We have everything from CL2 to CL3, and we are planning to expand and have the funds to expand to CL4, which is the highest level of containment that is required for special pathogens. We have also recently completed construction of our Vaccine Development Centre, which now adds to VIDO the capacity for pilot scale manufacturing to support regulatory approval. So this is very much, VIDO is a research organization. We recognize, and many recognize, the gap or the desert between proof of concept in a laboratory and bringing that concept to commercial market. And having a vaccine development center, now being able to scale up production, support and produce materials that can be used in regulatory trials and de-risk those products so they can ultimately end up in the hands of people and in the hands of producers where they will have impact. They're not going to do much good in the laboratory. So we have currently around 175 personnel. That includes trainees and permanent staff and scientists. As most academic research-intensive organization, we attract talent from around the world, so there's 32 different nations represented here in terms of our staff. 60 of us are PhD level researchers. That includes our principal investigators who lead research programs. That includes project managers. It includes postdoctoral fellows, and it includes many of our support staff. We are ISO 9000 in terms of quality control, particularly in terms of the commercial contract research that we do for commercial organizations. And in our history, we have commercialized we've commercialized 8 vaccines that have been out there in the animal industry and helping support protection against a number of diseases. So what are our major roles? First and foremost, we are a discovery research organization where our principal investigators are studying pathogens. We're studying how pathogens interact with their animal hosts. And of course, using that information to design novel strategies that will help protect against disease. With the addition now of our Vaccine Development Center, we can also take that now in-house developed technology and move it from proof of concept in the laboratory, scale up those laboratory style processes to processes that are suitable for manufacture, and that will allow us to start to test these vaccines in a regulatory environment and again, get them into the hands of those who need them. And of course, we do that for both relevant human diseases as well as animal diseases. VIDO's infrastructure, and I'll cover that in a moment, of course, is at the very least rare in the world, and certainly it's prudent that this infrastructure to be available to not only to our inside investigators, but broadly across Canada and globally. So we do function as a contract research organization. We have project managers who work with commercial entities, and we can test their novel strategies within our, again, rare and expensive facilities. And with the addition of our vaccine development facility, we can also do that for external agencies who have new proof of concept vaccines or other biologics that, again, they want to move through the regulatory process to commercialization. We are part of the university, and of course, knowledge sharing and training are ingrained within our culture. This is an example of our knowledge sharing in terms of the broader community and public stakeholders. And we have a number of other, of course, journal publications and publications that we do to inform our community. As well, as you know, part of Canada's strategy post-pandemic, certainly highlighted post-pandemic, is the need to grow our talent pool, very skilled talent pool involved in infectious disease research and countermeasure development. And we're very much a part of training those individuals, whether they be specialized laboratory technicians, operations folks, new master's and graduate PhD students that will lead research programs in the future, manufacturing technicians that can work in these very precise environments and are capable of contributing to countermeasure development. So, without lie, the last 5 years have been hectic. Punctuated, of course, by the pandemic and an organization that's also focused on human disease. We have been very much active in terms of the pandemic response. That's really highlighted by our first vaccine that has gotten into human clinical trials. So our COVID vaccine has gone through the first stages of human clinical trials, and that vaccine is now forming the basis for new technology that will expand the ability of that vaccine to protect against a broad subgroup of coronaviruses rather than just the SARS-CoV-2 that we're experiencing now. So great future there in terms of building on that technology. In a huge industry engagement, a huge whether it's that's other scientists or whether that's the health community or whether that's the livestock community, in terms of understanding what's happening with SARS-CoV-2 and using our expertise to engage the public and engage decision makers. We also have some very significant infrastructure, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of its application to disease control strategies. And as others have mentioned this afternoon, you can't do everything all on your own. So this infrastructure then has been available to countries and academics across Canada, in fact across the world, in terms of access to our facilities to test their control strategies. And, and a huge spike, of course, with the pandemic. But over the last 3 years even, we've probably tested 350 or 400 different vaccines and therapeutics for their effectiveness against SARS-CoV-2. So in addition to our own discovery program and developing our own strategies, we've also contributed substantively to testing the control strategies of others in our community. Again, one of our major assets is Intervac, our high containment facility, and it is a major facility in terms of size alone. There are 18 animal rooms in this facility. Each can hold at least 50 pigs, about 10 steers. We often talk about that we can house everything from bats to bison, and indeed we have. And I'll talk later about bison in terms of trying to control TB in the wild bison population. Not only do we have the animal rooms that allow us to work directly with animals and large animals that are critical to the livestock industry, but also the research labs that allow us to work directly with virus and cells, of course, but take the tissue samples from these animals that are infected or where we're testing their response, the protection of various control strategies to measure their response and establish whether those control strategies work. And I mean, I always like to share when the representation of the size of our facility compared to a Canadian football field, and the logos on the field are used without prejudice, of course. Starting before the pandemic, and certainly amplified by the pandemic, VIDO was obviously well positioned to fill some of the gaps in the Canadian pandemic response strategy and the Canadian pandemic landscape. And one of the first components of that infrastructure growth that underpins our role as Canada's Centre for Pandemic Research is the completion of our manufacturing facility. And the ability then again to take proof of concept, whether human or animal, move them into a manufacturing facility and de-risk them in terms of commercial investment so that we can get good data in terms of regulatory approval. We know how to make this at commercial scale and we can get vaccines into the community. We, as I mentioned earlier as well, we've also received funding to upgrade our capacity to CL4, the highest level of containment. Again, this facility, we're very fortunate actually that this facility, original facility, was built with considerable foresight. And in fact, a component of the facility was actually built to CL4 capacity. So this is about going back now 10 years later and making sure that the infrastructure is all in place and commissioning the facility to now to be able to deal with high containment pathogens. We're also building a new animal facility. If you walked in from the parking lot, you would have seen the Graham Construction big red banner cordoning off site preparation for this new facility. The sidewalk that you were on would have come along here. And so this new facility really replaces our 1978 original facility that is CL2 capable. So CL2, or containment level 2, allows us to work with pathogens like Mycoplasma bovis, like Iones, like Salmonella, like E. coli, like PRRS, for example. So these are level 2, a lower level of containment, and we're rebuilding those facilities again to allow us to have capacity for large and small animals and animals that, of course, that are relevant to the livestock industry. We're also adding here capacity for things like insects, as we think about climate change and the increasing regions that various insects are able to spread to, including in Canada, and bring with them diseases that might affect us. We're also working, we'll also have capacity here for non-human primates, particularly to support human vaccine development. We'll have capacity for bats, and of course we'll have capacity for the normal rodents, mice, and rabbits, and so on. And so this is really about replacing some of that that well-aged facility and well-used facility. This is nearly 10 times our existing footprint. So a major upgrade for VIDO in terms of our capacity to develop control strategies. It's also going to be a holding area where animals can be first managed here and then moved into our high containment facility, which is located up here on the map. Finally, we're doing some renovations to our 1978 facility in terms of the labs to bring them up to current requirements. So a significant investment in terms of infrastructure that again is rare in the world, and that again we work very hard to make sure that we have global engagement. Our driving principles around the pandemic center is really about being able to grow Canada's ability to respond to any emerging pathogen in the future. One thing the pandemic taught us is that we can have the infrastructure, we also need the people. You can't walk into a level 3 lab tomorrow or a level 4 lab tomorrow and be effective. There's many months of training before you can do that. And if you're in the middle of a pandemic, you certainly can't. We've actually found ourselves in a position of, do we train more people or do we continue to work on SARS-CoV-2 control strategies? Because you can't do both. That's a one. Training in CL3 and CL4 is a one-on-one relationship. We also are working on the principle that we have access to a variety of animal models. So the laboratory mouse is no longer, and hasn't been for some time, an adequate model to fully predict how humans will respond, let alone how cattle and pigs and sheep and bison will respond. And so we have the capacity to work of course with mice, but also with relevant livestock and large animal species. Again, very much about spanning the spectrum from discovery of novel control strategies through to de-risking them and improving the ability to commercialize those strategies by adding manufacturing capacity and taking those laboratory proof of concept again into the manufacturing facility. And as I've mentioned as well, all of this in terms of infrastructure means nothing without the talent here in order to drive it. And so a very significant part of this strategy in terms of a Center for Pandemic Research is to recruit experts to VIDO and of course to train those experts too going forward. Since we're talking about a vaccine bank, a moment to describe our in-house manufacturing facility and what it can do. This is really a pilot scale processing facility. Again, we're a research organization. The primary focus is advancing research, but now advancing research forward into the commercialization stage. So that's called process development, really. Developing processes from the laboratory scale to the commercial scale and doing things in a format that is documented, the regulatory agencies approve, and you now have material that you can inject in an animal or into a human and generate data for regulatory approval. The facility is capable, it's a campaign facility, it's capable of switching between human and animal diseases. It is capable of manufacturing really all of the vaccine technologies, whether that's a killed bacterium or a killed virus, whether it's a live virus, whether it's a subunit vaccine, or whether it is a messenger RNA-based vaccine. And it is capable of switching to a containment facility so that negative air pressure, filtered air, and we could, in a case of emergency, grow, for example, one of the simplest types of vaccines is to grow up the pathogen, kill it, and formulate it into a vaccine. So we could absolutely do that here for pathogens requiring higher containment. If you're going to grow them up in 500 liters or 1,000 liters, you certainly want to do that in containment. Again, I'm not sure I need to really talk about this a lot more again, but what we talk about discovery and development in terms of technology readiness levels, and it's described here: knowledge development, technology development, commercialization. And traditionally, academic institutions tend to focus down here, right, on knowledge development, proof of concept in the laboratory. And again, the addition of our manufacturing capacity allows us to take this technology demonstration at the lab scale and move it up in terms of commercial manufacturing and ultimately out licensing to a commercial company. For humans, we will have the capacity to make vaccines that can go into clinical trials. In animals, we could actually make commercial vaccines. And the potential there, I think we need to work out what the details might be, but certainly many of you are aware that the Canadian market is often small, maybe unique in terms of the specific strains that we're dealing with. And we see the potential where VIDO could actually make commercial vaccine here and make it available to the industry to support animal health. These small market, we sometimes refer to as orphan vaccines, do not attract the level of commercial attention that large companies sometimes need. And so maybe there's an opportunity here for VIDO to play a role nationally in terms of animal vaccine manufacture. Again, I just wanted to highlight, we talk a lot about infrastructure, but I wanted to highlight the fact that we have a lot of expertise, a lot of talent here that are driving research programs. I'm focusing here on our research team leaders who are driving research programs in mycoplasma, in tuberculosis, in SARS-CoV-2, in MERS, in influenza. And again, these guys, many are in the room here are getting all the credit in terms of the pictures on the wall. But remember that we also have a number of highly skilled individuals who are responsible for operations, maintaining our containment facility, who are responsible for biosafety. Our technical staff who are working in laboratories, who are working with animals that are infectious and potentially hazardous to themselves. And so all of these are highly skilled. And again, it's not the time of a pandemic to start saying, oh, I need to train up some folks. So we need to maintain this kind of capacity beyond the war times and also in the peace times, if we can use that analogy. And of course, as I said, this kind of infrastructure helps us attract scientists from around the world. These are the scientists that we've attracted here in the last 3 years, and we'll continue to have actually opportunities for new scientists to come to Saskatoon and help us respond to infectious diseases of global importance. So this is a fantastic team that we've been able to attract here recently. And again, I'm always on the hunt, so let me know if you know of someone capable in this area. We are well connected, of course. I think Dr. Kochar told us this morning that no one can work as an island. We are well connected across the Canadian landscape. We are well connected globally, as is obvious here in terms of our Pirbright and other connections. Again, infectious disease, our work has to be globally competitive. It has to be equal across the world in terms of its efficacy. But we know that infectious disease does not represent borders, does not respect borders, and infectious disease is a global problem. And of course, what the information we got this morning about FMD underlines that. Probably don't have enough time to do as much as I wanted here in terms of some of the work that we are doing. Again, we are a One Health organization. One Health really recognizes that humans and people occupy one Earth, one globe, one environment, and that our health is interconnected. And so with our combined focus on both human health and animal health, we are very much a One Health organization in terms of our focus. I won't talk much about what we're working on the human side. There's quite a list here in terms of the types of diseases that we're working on the animal side. And I've bolded a couple there. If we have a little bit of time, I'll pick one or two or probably to talk to you about in terms of the work that we've been doing. Obviously, we've heard African swine fever a few times this afternoon. A major threat to the Canadian swine industry, spreading in Europe, spreading in Asia, with the potential in terms of a trade-limiting disease to have significant impacts in North America if it were to get here. And of course, Haiti, Dominican Republic recently increases or gets our hackles up in terms of as it comes closer. We're working on establishing one of the big problems with a simple problem, basic problem with ASF is really growing it and stable cell lines so that it maintains its genetic stability. And we're working on cell lines that will allow us to do that. And we're also working on developing vaccines and antivirals that are not reliant on the live virus that will hopefully help to ultimately control this disease. And as we said, this is not an individual effort. We're working with CFIA, we're working with Pirbright, we're working with USDA and others in terms of a global community. This is an example, of course, of a foreign animal disease. VIDO is the only institution in Canada outside of CFIA that has been permitted to work with African swine fever. And that very much, obviously we have the infrastructure and the expertise to work with ASF, but it also required the involvement of industry to assure CFIA that VIDO could contribute at a global level in terms of the response to this infectious threat. And again, we're all aware, I think, of the feral pig problem in Canada. This not only applies to African swine fever, but also FMD, and a huge threat in terms of if this pig becomes infected, it will be very difficult to become ASF negative or perhaps FMD negative. That would be an interesting discussion for the panel. We're working on, obviously, highly pathogenic avian influenza. We have scientists who have been working in influenza for a number of years and are turning their attention to highly pathogenic avian influenza. I actually have a proposal currently under review that is a collaboration with the University of Guelph, with CFIA, and with the University of Toronto to start working on a highly pathogenic avian influenza vaccine for poultry. Many jurisdictions in the world are thinking about vaccination as part of a control strategy, as we've talked about for FMD. And so this is part of getting Canada ready for that potential eventuality. It's one of the interesting components of this proposal actually is to move vaccine production for influenza out of eggs and into other cell types, because just imagine if you have avian influenza, you may have a bit of a call or run on eggs availability to make your vaccine. So that's one of the interesting objectives of this strategy. Contagious bovine pleural pneumonia, another foreign animal disease, important in Africa, devastating in Africa. There is a vaccine in Africa for this disease. It's a live attenuated vaccine. There's lots of issues with it in terms of adverse reactions, in terms of variable quality. You can't use antibiotics. And so we worked with our partners at ILRI, at CalRO in Kenya, and with the International Development Research Centre in Canada, funded by the International Development Research Centre in Canada, to develop the first effective subunit vaccine for CBPP. And we're working now to take this will be one of the first vaccines that moves through our facility with the objective of ultimately going through regulatory approval in Africa and transferring the manufacturing technology to Africa. I think I should probably wind things up. We are working on tuberculosis. I'm sure you're aware of the recent outbreak of tuberculosis in Saskatchewan. We have developed models for this disease in cattle and pigs and in bison. In bison, of course, this is really about controlling or maintaining our wildlife herds, maintaining our herds of bison, which are endemic for TB and brucellosis. So can we protect those herds and save those herds and at the same time reduce the potential for infection with respect to our cattle herd? And we're also working on a vaccine for cattle as well. And you can see we have a very strong set of group here working on TB, working both on the animal side and on the human side going forward. Very excited about our potential in this field. I'll leave Johne's disease. Tony's, I've seen Tony around. You can have a chat with Tony perhaps later on this evening. We're certainly in the early stages of Johne's vaccine development, but certainly a very significant production limiting disease that requires our attention. I'll finish then by highlighting our two communication specialists, Trenna and Caitlin. Caitlin is here. I think Trenna is at the back somewhere there. Please join me in a round of thanking them for the work they've done to organize today. And also thanking our sponsors as they're listed here. That are very important in terms of funding our industry engagement and communications programs. We've just recently added Caitlin and grown our capacity in terms of interacting with the livestock community. And again, one example of that is the summit that we're having today. So thank you very much. And I guess we're ready to switch to the panel.